I never thought the hands that used to reach for mine every time we crossed the street would one day reach for my throat. My son is 36 years old. He has a master's degree in finance. He drives a car that cost more than my first house. And last October, he stood in my kitchen and told me that if I didn't hand over $50,000, he would make sure I died alone. I'm 68 years old. I worked for the Postal Service for 31 years. I woke up at 4:30 every morning, rain or ice or August heat that felt like standing inside an oven. I never called in sick unless I truly couldn't move. I believed in something back then. I believed that if you showed up and you did the work and you kept your word, life would return the favor. For a long time it did. My wife, Carolyn, passed 7 years ago, breast cancer. We had 34 years together, and I will tell you honestly that not one of those years felt wasted. She was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday, who kept a spare key for the elderly neighbor down the block, who cried at commercials for paper towels. After she was gone, the house felt wrong. Too quiet in the wrong places, loud in others, the furnace kicking on at night, the refrigerator hum I'd never noticed before. I learned to cook for one. I learned to sleep in the center of the bed. You adapt. You don't move on exactly, but you adapt. My son, I'll call him by his name, the one I gave him, Desmond. We named him after Carolyn's grandfather, a man who built furniture by hand and never raised his voice in his life. I used to think the name would carry something of that steadiness. Maybe it did for a while. Desmond was a good kid. Not perfect, but good. He studied hard, played soccer in high school, called on Sundays when he went away to college. I was proud of him in that simple, chest-filling way that doesn't need a reason. I'm not sure exactly when things started to shift. These things don't announce themselves. There's no moment you can point to and say, there, that's when it started going wrong. But somewhere in his late 20s, after the graduate degree, after the job at the firm in Charlotte, after he started dating Ingrid, somewhere in there, he changed in ways I couldn't name but could feel. He talked differently, not just vocabulary, though that too. It was the tone, the way a question started sounding like an assessment, the way he'd look around my house when he visited, that quick sweep of the eyes that took in the old couch, the laminate countertops, the ceiling fan that wobbled slightly to the left. Ingrid, I want to be fair here, because I know how easy it is to make a daughter-in-law into a villain in a story like this. But I also want to be honest. Ingrid is intelligent. She is organized. She speaks in complete sentences, and she has opinions about everything, which in itself is not a flaw. What troubled me was the way those opinions had a way of becoming Desmond's opinions within a week or two of her expressing them. He would visit in March, and we'd talk about something, my neighborhood, my retirement income, my plans. And then he'd visit again in May, and it was like he'd been briefed, like someone had prepared talking points. She came from money, not enormous money, but comfortable money, the kind where certain things are simply assumed, renovations, vacations, the right school district, a certain size of wedding. I think she looked at Desmond's background and saw potential she intended to develop. I don't say that with venom. I say it because I think it's true, and because I think Desmond wanted to be developed. He was embarrassed of where he came from in a way that he never admitted out loud, but that I could see every time he went quiet when I mentioned the neighborhood I grew up in, or the fact that I'd never owned a passport until I was 52. They got engaged 2 years ago. Desmond called me on a Saturday morning and he sounded happy, genuinely happy, the kind I recognized from when he was a boy. I told him I was glad. I meant it. I asked him about the ring, about how he proposed, about whether her parents were pleased. He said yes to all of it. Then, at the end of the call, almost as an afterthought, he said, "We're thinking of doing something really special, Dad. Ingrid always dreamed of a big wedding." I didn't think much of it then. The first conversation happened 3 months later, over dinner at a restaurant he chose, the kind with no prices on half the menu and bread that comes in a cloth bag. He laid it out like a presentation. They wanted a venue on the water, a band, not a DJ, a plated dinner for 200 guests, flowers that I wouldn't have been able to name. He had a number in his head already, somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000. He wanted to know if I could contribute. I set down my fork. I want to be clear. I have savings. I am not a wealthy man, but I am not a poor one. 31 years with the federal government means a pension. I have a modest amount set aside. Money I have spent years protecting because at 68 you are aware. very concretely aware that your body is not a guarantee and that nursing care costs more than most people allow themselves to think about. That money exists so that I do not become a burden, so that if something happens to me, I can handle it with whatever dignity is available. I told Desmond that I loved him and I was happy for him and that I could offer something meaningful. I had a number in mind, around 5,000, a gift, no strings. But that 50,000 was not something I could do responsibly. I explained why. I was calm about it. I thought I was being reasonable. He looked at me the way you look at someone who has said something embarrassing in public. "Dad," he said, "you've been sitting on that money for years. What exactly are you saving it for?" I told him. He shook his head. "You're not going to a nursing home. We'll take care of you." That sentence. I've thought about it many times since. "We'll take care of you." Offered as reassurance, but what it really was, I understand now, was a transaction. A promise of future care in exchange for present money. And the particular cruelty of it is that he said it as if it were generous. We didn't resolve anything that night. I drove home and sat in my kitchen for a long time. I thought about Carolyn and what she would have said. She would have told me not to be stubborn. She also would have told me not to be foolish. I was trying to figure out which one applied. The calls started after that. At first they were normal. "How are you? How's the weather? Did you watch the game?" Then gradually, they started including updates about the wedding planning that I hadn't asked for. The venue deposit was due. The caterer required a decision. The dress was more than they'd budgeted. Each one ended the same way. A pause, and then something like, "It's just a lot to manage on our own." I held the line. I didn't say no forever. I said, "Not now, not this amount. Let's talk about something smaller." It was never enough. In September, Desmond drove down on a Thursday afternoon without calling first. I was in the garage when I heard his car. He came around the side of the house, and he looked like he hadn't been sleeping. His jaw was tight. He had a folder. He sat at my kitchen table and opened the folder and showed me a breakdown, a literal spreadsheet of their finances, the gap between what they had and what the wedding required. He'd printed it out, color-coded. "I need you to see what we're actually dealing with," he said. I looked at the spreadsheet. I looked at his face. I said quietly, "Desmond, why does the wedding have to cost this much?" He closed the folder. "Because this matters to Ingrid," he said, "and Ingrid matters to me, and I thought I mattered to you." That was the turn. I felt it in the room, the temperature of it. "You do matter to me," I said. "That's not what we're discussing. Then why won't you help?" "I am willing to help. I've told you that. $5,000. He said it the way you repeat something absurd. "Dad, do you know what $5,000 covers in a wedding like this?" "It covers the flowers. Just the flowers. Not even all of them." I told him I was sorry about that, but the number was what I could offer responsibly. He stood up. He walked to the window. I could see his shoulders moving the way they used to when he was a teenager trying to hold something back. Then he turned around, and I want to tell you that I almost didn't recognize him. "You have the money," he said. "I know you do. You're just choosing not to give it to us. And I need you to understand. I need you to really hear this. That if you keep refusing, Ingrid and I are going to have to reassess our relationship with you. Going forward, she's going to be my wife. You are going to be on the outside of that looking in. And I am telling you now so you can't say later that I didn't warn you." I sat there. I am 68 years old. I sat in the kitchen I have lived in for 22 years. At the table where I taught my son to do his homework. Where we ate every Thanksgiving after his mother got sick and couldn't manage a big gathering. Where I sat alone for 3 days after her funeral because I could not make myself go anywhere, and my son stood in front of me and told me I would be on the outside looking in. I said very carefully, "I hear you, and I'm still telling you no." He left. He didn't slam the door, which somehow felt worse. Just a quiet click. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 4 days later he came back. This time Ingrid was with him. I opened the door and I could see by the way she was standing, shoulders back, chin level, that this was not a visit. This was an intervention. They came inside. Ingrid sat at my kitchen table without being invited to, which I noticed. Desmond remained standing. He started, talking about family, about sacrifice, about what it means to support the people you love. He had clearly prepared. It sounded rehearsed in a way that made my chest hurt. Then Ingrid spoke. She said that she had always tried to have a good relationship with me. She said that she had been patient. She said that in her family, parents invested in their children's futures, that a wedding was not an expense but a foundation, and that she found it difficult. She paused on that word, difficult, to understand why I was treating their future as less important than a number in a bank account. I want to tell you that I stayed calm. I did. I have spent a lot of years learning how to hold things without letting them spill. I said that I respected her perspective, and that I understood the wedding was important to her, and that my answer remained the same. Desmond slammed his hand on the counter. It happened fast. One moment he was standing there, and the next his palm came down flat on the counter with a sound that rattled the window, and he was saying things, not carefully prepared things, but raw, ugly things, that you should not hear from your child, that I was selfish, that I had always been selfish, that his mother had wanted things I never gave her, that I sat on money like it was mine and mine alone, like his mother hadn't helped build it, like he wasn't entitled to his mother's share. That one landed, not because it was true. It wasn't true, but because it was designed to land, and he knew exactly where to aim. I stood up. I said, "You need to leave." He did not leave. He stepped closer, and I want to be precise about this because it matters later. He put his hand on my chest and he pushed. Not a punch, not a grab, a push. Hard enough that I stepped back and caught the counter with my elbow and felt something sharp go through my arm that I told myself was just surprise. Ingrid said, "Desmond." That was all. Just his name. He stopped. He breathed. He looked at me and I looked at him. And I thought about those hands that used to reach for mine in parking lots, in crosswalks, in the dark of a power outage, when he was 7 years old and frightened. "We'll talk when you've thought about this more," he said. They left. I sat on the kitchen floor, not because I couldn't stand, because standing seemed like more than I wanted to do. I did not tell anyone. Not my brother, not my neighbor Lloyd, who has been my friend for 19 years, not my doctor when I went in the following week and he noticed the bruising on my forearm and I said I'd caught it on a cabinet door. I don't know exactly why I kept it inside. Shame, maybe. Not my shame, but I was carrying it anyway. The way you carry something that doesn't belong to you because there is no one else to hold it. What I did do, and I cannot fully explain why I did it at this exact moment, was call a locksmith that same afternoon and have my locks changed. And I drove to the bank the following morning, and I spoke with someone there. A young woman named, according to her nameplate, Ms. Del Rey. And I asked some questions about what records exist and how to protect them. She was thorough and kind, and she didn't ask why. I also, and I want you to understand that something in me had shifted, I bought a small camera, the kind you can order online and that looks like a wall outlet. I put it in the corner of my kitchen facing the table. I did not know whether Desmond would come back. I told myself he probably wouldn't. I was wrong about that too. He called 3 weeks later. His voice was different, softer, more like the son I recognized. He said he wanted to apologize. He said he'd been under enormous pressure and he'd handled it badly and he was sorry. I accepted the apology because he is my son and because I wanted it to be real. He asked if he could come by to talk. I said yes. This time he came alone. He sat across from me and he looked tired in a way that went past not sleeping, a deeper tired. He talked about the pressure of the wedding, of Ingrid's expectations, of feeling caught between two worlds. He cried. My son sat at my kitchen table and cried, and I handed him a paper towel because I didn't have tissues within reach, and I felt the particular grief of loving someone who has hurt you and not being able to stop. He asked me one more time, not aggressive, not with a spreadsheet, just, "Dad, please, is there anything you can do?" I told him again. 5,000. That is what I have to offer as a gift. Not a loan, a gift. He nodded. He thanked me. He said he understood. 3 weeks after that visit, I got a letter from a financial services company I had never heard of. It referenced an account application. It had my name on it, my social security number, my address. I had not applied for any account. I sat with that letter for a long time before I allowed myself to understand what I was looking at. And then I made calls. I called my bank, and then the credit bureaus, and then a number that Lloyd gave me for a lawyer his cousin had used, a man named Ferris, who worked out of an office downtown with framed licenses on every wall and a handshake that meant something. What Ferris found over the following 10 days was not small. Someone had used my information, my full legal name, my social security number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name, to apply for 2 credit accounts and attempt to access a home equity line. The applications had been made online. 2 of them had been partially processed. One had resulted in a hard credit inquiry that lowered my score by 11 points. I knew who had the information. I had given it to Desmond 2 years earlier when he'd helped me refinance. He'd asked for it to fill in a form, and I had given it to him because he was my son and I trusted him completely. That is the detail I come back to. I trusted him completely. Ferris laid it out without drama. He said we could go to the police or we could not. He said the evidence was circumstantial but pointed clearly in one direction. He asked me what I wanted to do. I thought about Carolyn. I thought about what she would say. And I thought about the fact that she is not here, and that I am 68 years old and someone has tried to steal from me, and that someone is the person I gave 36 years of my life to raise. I said, I want to do whatever protects me, and I want him to know that I know. We filed a report. Ferris contacted the financial institutions. The camera footage from my kitchen, from both visits, was preserved and handed over, not because there was anything on it that showed the fraud directly, but because the push, the contact, the thing said, those were on record now too. Evidence of a pattern, of coercion. Desmond was contacted by a detective in November. I was not there for that conversation. I know from Ferris that it was short. I know that Ingrid was present. I know that Desmond did not immediately lawyer up, which Ferris said was a mistake on his part. The case is still moving through its process, as these things do, slowly, with paperwork at every step. There are hearings scheduled. There is a lot I am not permitted to discuss in detail. What I can tell you is that I have not spoken to my son since October. Some nights I sit in the kitchen and I look at the corner where the camera is plugged in, and I think about all the mornings I made him breakfast at that table. Eggs with the yolk broken, the way he liked them when he was small. I think about the first day of school, and the soccer games, and the way he used to call me on Sunday nights from his college dorm, and talk about nothing in particular for 20 minutes and then say, "Okay, Dad, I'll let you go," and hang up. I love that kid. I love him still, in the way that you can love someone and know, at the same time, that you cannot be in the same room with them, that love and safety are not always compatible, that some things, once done, cannot be unmade. Lloyd came over for dinner last week. He brought a 6-pack, and we watched the game, and he didn't ask too many questions, which is one of the things I value most about him. At one point he said, "You doing okay?" And I said, "I'm working on it." And he nodded like that was a complete answer, because with someone who knows you well enough, it is. I am working on it. I want to say something to anyone who is sitting somewhere right now with a letter they don't understand, or a child who has said something that cannot be unsaid, or a trust that has been broken in a place they thought was safe. I want to say you are not foolish for having trusted. You are not to blame for the things someone else chose to do. The hands you raised, the meals you made, the years you gave. None of that becomes nothing just because it was taken for granted. It is still real. It was always real. I still have the house. I still have the pension. I still have Lloyd, and my brother Clifford, who drove 4 hours when I finally told him what had happened, and Ms. Del Rey at the bank, who sent a handwritten note when the fraudulent applications were formally closed. The wedding, I understand, was postponed. Whether it happened in some smaller form or not at all, I don't know. I don't know what Ingrid decided when she understood what her fiancé had done in the name of funding it. I don't know if she stayed. What I know is this. Every morning I make coffee in the kitchen, where I have lived for 22 years, and I sit at the table where my son once cried over homework, and later cried over pressure he had brought on himself, and I drink the coffee, and I do not look at the corner with the camera in it, and I think about what my wife would say. She would say, "You're still here. That's enough for today." She was usually right about things like that.